Hey, what's happening everybody? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to theorize a little bit more about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Obviously, this is really the most high-profile game from Nintendo that we know is currently being developed and worked on. It is currently slated for 2022, although I think many of us think that there is that small possibility that it shifts around a little bit or maybe even gets delayed until 2023. And beyond that, honestly, the game is still a huge mystery. We have gotten two pretty interesting and very intriguing and super cool trailers, more like teasers really, for the game, and it's definitely whet our appetites for whatever they might be finally unveiling to us with this game. And so here we sit, waiting to find out more about this game. When will it actually release? What will the gameplay and story actually be like? What hardware will it release on? Is it releasing just on the current Switch, or will it somehow kind of relate to some sort of cross-gen or pro-related super huge upgrade that I've discussed many times? And of course, we can't forget the last big detail. What will the official title of the game be? Before we dive any deeper into the Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 title theory speculation stuff today, I like to remind you guys I am always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I upload every single week. I talk about all things Nintendo and I talk about all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So, as you could obviously tell, what I want to talk to you guys about a little bit today really is the possible title for Breath of the Wild 2. And I know that it may not be the most exciting concept, and my predictions and theories and the direction that I'm going with today's video may not be the most hype-invigorating kind of thing, but to me, I think it's pretty interesting and cool. I have a unique sort of, I don't know, formula that I'm using to kind of predict the direction they're going to go with the title. And I think that part of the reason that actually is kind of fun and important is because many times the title of a Zelda game directly correlates to some aspect about the gameplay of the game. In fact, I would say almost every title to a Zelda game very much relates to what the gameplay and the game and the story is actually like. Now, I'm trying not to make the Game Awards a running theme on the channel right now in the build-up to this show because, as you've heard me say, I'm actually really upset with the whole concept of the Game Awards. Metroid Dread's nomination notwithstanding, of course, I am kind of, I'm having beef, so to speak, with the Game Awards and with Jeff Keighley, but I can't really have a conversation like this without at least touching on the fact that with the Game Awards happening very soon on, I think, December 8th, so it's about a week and a half or so away from right now, almost 2 weeks, there's a great chance that Breath of the Wild 2 may be talked about or shown or discussed in some way at the show. You've heard me talk about what I think might be happening with Metroid Prime 4 or just the Metroid franchise in general at the Game Awards, and I still very much think that there is a great chance for us to see some cool Metroid stuff there. But beyond that, I mean, The Legend of Zelda has had a presence at the show many, many times. We know this. We've all been talking about that. And so, obviously, I think it's worth noting that, yeah, maybe the time for them to give us an update, a trailer, a release date, or a title could feasibly be at the Game Awards. But beyond that, I want to rein this back in and focus specifically on my pseudo prediction about what the title of Breath of the Wild 2 will be, because of course we've been calling it The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, even though that's not officially what it's called. Nintendo keeps referring to it as the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. None of those are very exciting or cool. We know that those are not the final titles for the game. We want something more real. And now, as the title of my video here will suggest, I am kind of having fun a little bit with the idea, and I am, quote-unquote clickbaiting you guys to a degree, and I know I'm going to kind of joke about that in the title for this video once I finally post it here, because what I don't have as a prediction is an actual prediction for the final title of the game. But what I wanted to talk to you about and what my prediction relates to is the fact that, by and large, for the most part, what we've seen are two different kinds of titles for Zelda games in the past. There are titles that are item-based or instrument or weapon-based, and then there are titles that are more idea-based or concept-based or story-based that aren't so much about an actual thing. And I think if we take a look at the two teasers that we've seen for Breath of the Wild 2, most specifically the second one from E3 this year in 2021, I think we've got enough information to go on to kind of push me in the direction of believing that the title will be more of an item or weapon related kind of title. Now obviously I should explain a little bit more what I mean when I talk about the two different kinds of titles that I think we've seen in Zelda games in the past. Again, there are the more idea or story related titles that we've seen in the past. These are something like Breath of the Wild, for example. That's a great example of a title that's just Breath of the Wild. It doesn't have anything to do with anything in the game. It's really just talking about the world and the idea of the fact that the world is a breathing, real kind of open world experience. You also have The Adventures of Link, or Skyward Sword, or A Link to the Past, or Link's Awakening. These are great examples of titles, Zelda game titles, that are just ideas that are kind of related to some of the events in the game, but they're not talking specifically necessarily about a thing, a weapon, an instrument, or an item of some kind. But on the flip side, we do have those item or weapon-based titles for Zelda games, such as the Ocarina of Time. The ocarina is the instrument in the game. Majora's Mask, that's the mask in the game. The Wind Waker, the Minish Cap, the Phantom Hourglass, Link's crossbow training, because he has a crossbow in it. Those, of course, are all titles that are very much about a weapon or an instrument or an item that Link actually has, and that is a part of the gameplay mechanics within the games. And I know at this point, it's obvious to you what I'm talking about, but it was worth me spending, I think, a couple of minutes kind of separating the two ideas. I do think it's worth noting in a kind of funny way, the one title that, in my opinion, kind of crosses into both here is actually Twilight Princess. Because Twilight Princess, in the game, the Twilight Princess is not an item or a weapon or an instrument or something that Link, wields as a part of the gameplay. Twilight Princess actually refers to a person, so it is still a noun, because a noun is a person, place, or thing, right? But it's not an item or a weapon. Like I said, it's not something that Link holds and wields in some way. The Twilight Princess is actually Zelda, and we know that because in the game, Midna actually refers to Zelda as the Twilight Princess. So I guess in a weird way, does that make the title of that game, The Legend of Zelda, Zelda? And so now that we've established what it is I'm talking about and the line that I'm drawing between most of the titles of the Zelda franchise, not all, there are, some things like Four Swords Adventures and stuff that does some of the weirder things, but like I said, for the most part, you can clearly define most titles in either Category A or Category B. And I've told you I think that this is falling under the item-based or weapon-based category of Zelda titles for Breath of the Wild 2. And the main reason why I think that is because of this weird arm gauntlet thing that Link seems to be using or wearing in the teaser for Breath of the Wild 2. In the newest teaser for the game shown at E3 this year, we see that shot, that close-up of Link's right arm, as it's being sort of, taken over or infused with this kind of an armband or something that I see as maybe like a gauntlet or a glove, something that appears to imbue him with some kind of magical powers or abilities. And in the immediate shot after that close-up of his arm, we actually see him use it. The famous shot of the spiky ball falling down a cliff, and he seems to be able to stop the ball in its tracks and reverse time and send it backwards up the path that it actually came. And he is specifically using this item on his hand. You can see him kind of do it. And the first teaser showed us that, quick shot of him holding his arm up as if it was hurting him or doing something. We've seen these brief hints in these two teasers of something that has to do with his right arm, something that he's wearing, something that might even be stuck on him unwillingly, but that he appears to be able to use and harness its powers and its magic, and will probably be a huge hook to the overall gameplay and the story. The story of why he has this thing in the first place, and the gameplay of all of the different powers it may actually allow him to use. In fact, you almost could have called Breath of the Wild something in related to the Sheikah Slate, the Sheikah Slate of Doom or whatever, because that was the item in that game that he used for some of the certain powers in that game. And I think in Breath of the Wild 2, it's all about this glove or gauntlet item that's on his right arm. And while of course I could be wrong here, I'm literally just guessing as a fan and just using my history with the franchise and the, 5 minutes we have between these two teasers for this game that are very vague to inform this idea and this, pseudo prediction, like I said, about the fact that I think the title for Breath of the Wild 2 very likely could be about this thing on his arm. So maybe, if I was to just, throw out a random guess or two, maybe it's going to be called The Legend of Zelda, The Gauntlet of Destiny, right? Something like that, or The Glove of Hyrule. That's the kind of title, if you think about it, when you look at things like, the Wind Waker and the Ocarina of Time, things like that. This is the title that I think would fit what we've seen from these teasers with Link wearing this armband thing. And again, going back to the story element of the armband, I think that that's one of the things we can't forget is, yes, it would be cool to actually learn how this thing affects the gameplay, and it would be cool to have another Zelda game that's titled based on the item that you use in the game, but I also think the story of why he has this thing could be very, very interesting. Like I said, I just kind of have this feeling that there's a chance that this is something he either gets stuck with, that's, again, put on him unwillingly, like maybe he didn't want it, or maybe he doesn't even know that it's happening. Perhaps he, gets knocked unconscious, and while he's unconscious, somebody is helping him, and they realize, you're the one who can save us, and in order to do it while you're unconscious, I'm gonna cast this spell on your right arm and give you this magic glove thing that lets you do stuff and stop Ganon and save Hyrule again. I feel like there's a chance that it's different than Link just comes across it in a dungeon and suddenly has it and is using it. It feels like, based on that shot in the second teaser, that this is something that he just might not be willingly using or allowing himself to have placed on his arm. He might just kind of be stuck with it, but then he has to learn how to wield it properly. Again, all fan theories and speculation. I'm just a Zelda fan having fun trying to make sense of these two teasers. I could be, part right and part wrong here, or I could even be completely wrong. But I will say, to end this video, that I feel kind of good about my theory. I think that we're going to get a title with Breath of the Wild 2 leaning more in the item-based title category, and I think there's a great chance that that item and title could relate to the gauntlet on his right arm. So that's it today, just a fun Zelda fan theory and speculation video. I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about this, nothing too serious or deep. With the Game Awards coming up soon, as frustrated as I am about the whole thing, it will be kind of awesome if we see Breath of the Wild 2 shown and discussed in some way at the show, right? I mean, obviously I want Metroid Prime 4 first and foremost, but I would be just as excited and hopping over my couch if it actually turns out to be Zelda stuff instead. So hopefully that's what we see. What do you think about my theory, how I broke down the titles, what I think might be happening with the title of Breath of the Wild 2? Do you think it would be item-based or weapon-based? Do you think it would have to do with the gauntlet on his arm? Or have you seen something that I've completely missed, and maybe you think it's something totally different? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.